Story 1. Operation Snow White took place during the 1970s when the Church of Scientology was concerned about the negative press and other damaging information that could be released about them. They leveraged a vast network of contacts within various United States government agencies to eliminate all negative information about the Church of Scientology and L. Ron Hubbard. Remarkably, they succeeded with much of this plan before being discovered. There was a significant amount of negative information about Scientology in the 1970s, possibly enough to dismantle the church, but it will never come to light because they used their substantial influence to have it destroyed. Story 2. In 2002, a cable technician named Mark Klein working for AT&T in San Francisco was sitting at his desk when he received an email from his bosses that a representative from the National Security Agency would be coming to visit for some unspecified reason. He was to give this NSA technician access to a cable substation for him to perform some work. The technician did his thing and Mark moved on without thinking anything of it. A year later, in 2003, Mark was transferred to that cable substation and by chance was assigned to monitor the internet room. This was the room where all the fiber optic ocean cables that carry the country's internet traffic terminate. While he was reviewing engineering drawings, he realized that the schematics revealed a secret room. More importantly, the plans showed cabinets filled with fiber optic splitters coming off every cable and feeding into the secret room. And to make it even crazier, neither he nor anyone on his team had access to the secret room. Through his investigation, he discovered that the NSA representative he had escorted the previous year had worked to install the system, which was sending a copy of all the internet traffic that passed through the substation straight to the National Security Agency. In other words, he had proof that the federal government had the capacity to tap into all internet traffic in the country. And I mean all of it. Every email, instant message, electronic sale, medical or criminal records, and research databases. Everything. Complete, unrestricted access. Like any sane person, he was extremely disturbed by this discovery. He went to his higher-ups but was essentially told to just keep it quiet. After retiring in 2004, he linked up with a group called the Electronic Frontier Foundation and essentially blew the whistle. He did interviews and handed over all his evidence to reporters. I watched one of these interviews in 2006, which is how I know about this story. I remember thinking it was so obvious once he explained it. Why wouldn't the National Security Agency tap into the internet traffic in the age of the War on Terror? I'd watched Enemy of the State, but nothing happened. No one I spoke to seemed to believe it, and Mark Klein's story eventually seemed to just fade away. 7 years later, in 2013, Edward Snowden leaked documents essentially confirming everything and then some. But to this day, everyone looks at me like a crazy person when I talk about knowing about it as early as 2006. Story 3. The Greenbrier Bunker. People love conspiracies about huge underground complexes built for the rich and famous to survive nuclear fallouts, and that's exactly what Greenbrier is. The bunker was built under the Greenbrier Resort for congresspeople to escape to, and was kept a secret for 30 years, even though people suspected why there is a 7,000-foot airstrip for a town of 3,000 people. For the entire time it was functional, every congressperson was assigned a bunk. These days you can take tours, and I'm sure we will hear about the next bunker once it is defunct. Story 4. The United States government actually had a paranormal unit. That movie, The Men Who Stare at Goats, it was based on a true story. The United States military was actively trying to see if they could find people with skills like stopping the heart of a goat, dowsing, or psychic spying. The whole thing pretty much fell apart when it was deemed that the people participating were not very effective. If you have to stare at a goat for hours in order to get it to fall over and die, how are they supposed to make use of it for assassinations? But bottom line, it did exist. The same with the Nazis having a paranormal unit during the 1940s. Hitler believed in acquiring the Spear of Destiny because he believed it would help him win the war, along with other occult stuff. That's partly what the Wolfenstein games have made popular. Story 5. The Central Intelligence Agency fed unreasonable amounts of drugs to people to document the effects and search for new weapons. I can't imagine taking heroic doses of lysergic acid diethylamide and then being questioned by government scientists for days. Story 6. Nestle aggressively marketed baby formula to mothers in developing countries by giving free samples to hospitals and buying up billboards. The mothers would use them instead of breast milk and eventually stop producing breast milk. Then they would need to buy formula to continue feeding their babies. Formula needed to be mixed with water, but because they often did not have clean water, they would put their babies at risk by mixing the formula with unclean water. Also, literacy rates were lower in many of those places, so the mothers did not know how to clean the bottles and could not read the instructions on the packaging. Those that did often did not have the means to carry them out. Many of them, being poorer, also resorted to watering down the formula to try and make it last longer, but then it would not have enough nutrients for the baby. Nestle downplayed all of this and said it was not their responsibility, that people there did not really have access to clean water and that they were just giving people the freedom of choice. Story 7, Big Tobacco Cover-Up, is a prime example. For decades, tobacco companies knew about the harmful and addictive effects of smoking, but actively suppressed research, manipulated data, and marketed cigarettes as safe. It was not until the 1990s, after internal documents were leaked, that the truth about their deceitful practices was fully exposed. Story 8. In the Tuskegee experiment, hundreds of African American men were purposely selected, deceived, and intentionally given fake syphilis treatments. 102 of them died. Story 9. Many prisons in the United States are private, for-profit companies. They get paid by the head and also employ the prisoners for pennies per hour to do work like telemarketing. You've probably talked to a prisoner on the phone without realizing. Story 10. The United States and the United Kingdom conspired to overthrow Iran's democratically elected Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh and restore the autocratic regime of the Pahlavi monarchy. They did this because Mossadegh tried to nationalize Iran's oil industry. Story 11. A main ingredient in the flavor of Coca-Cola still only comes from processing cocoa leaves into cocaine. The extract goes to the Coca-Cola flavor profile, and the cocaine that is produced as a byproduct gets sold to the health industry for medicinal use. There is only one company in the United States authorized to do this that has had a special arrangement with the Drug Enforcement Administration for nearly 100 years. Story 12. In the 1960s and 1970s, thousands of Native American women were sterilized without their consent. This was part of a practice to sterilize poor and minority women to help their financial situation and their family's quality of life by preventing unwanted pregnancies in poor communities. Some were not informed at all and had it done to them completely without their knowledge. Others were threatened with having their health care taken away if they did not agree to have it done to them. Some studies estimate that as many as 25 to 50% of Native American women were sterilized in the 1970s, representing tens of thousands of victims. This is essentially a modern-day genocide in the United States. Story 13. I am surprised that I have not seen Operation Paperclip yet. After defeating the Nazis, the United States government gave 1,600 of them government jobs here. Story 14. The Black Sox scandal was a major sports controversy that rocked the baseball world in 1919. It involved members of the Chicago White Sox, one of the best teams in the league at the time, who were accused of throwing the World Series against the Cincinnati Reds. The scandal involved 8 players, including shoeless Joe Jackson, who allegedly accepted bribes from gamblers to intentionally lose games. At first, many people thought the scandal was just a conspiracy theory, as the players denied any wrongdoing. The team was arguably in a top position, some of the accused were extremely popular, and some fans believed that the accusations were just a way to tarnish the team's reputation. However, an investigation uncovered evidence of a complex scheme involving gamblers, team owners, and players. The investigation revealed that the players had definitely accepted bribes amounting to the equivalent of a couple of $1 million today. I'm not a huge sports fan at all, but I am a history enthusiast, and this was one of the most significant scandals in sports history. It changed many things for the entire sport, including the appointment of a commissioner of baseball. Even though they were technically declared criminally innocent, all 8 players involved were banned for life, and they will never be inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame despite repeated attempts to do so over the decades. Story 15. The United States Public Health Service chose not to treat 400 African American individuals with syphilis in Alabama so they could study the progress of the disease if untreated. Story 16. The Ministry of Information in the United Kingdom spread misinformation that eating lots of carrots could improve night vision during World War II. They made this up to confuse the Germans. They had a new radar technology that allowed them to pinpoint German bombers from greater distances than before, and the carrot story was a ruse. That said, I do not know what is true on the internet these days, so I am half waiting for the comment that this story in itself was a ruse. Story 17. Lots of 1970s serial killers were Vietnam veterans literally taught the art of murdering and terrorizing civilians by the United States military. The war always comes home in some form or another. Story 18. General Motors, international business machines, and Ford played a major role in rearming Germany in the 1930s. George Bush's grandfather, Senator Prescott Bush, was a director and shareholder of companies that profited from their involvement with the financial backers of the German forces. Story 19. The chemicals in the water are turning the frogs gay. Atrazine, a chemical produced by the pesticide company Syngenta, has been proven to interfere with the endocrine system of frogs, turning them into hermaphrodites and even causing them to display homosexual behavior. They may prefer the company of other male frogs rather than female ones. Can also cause prostate cancer and birth defects and is in the drinking water of several states, so yes, there's that too. Story 20. Gulf of Tonkin Incident. Confirmed decades later by the former Secretary of Defense as being entirely false, the consequences of the incident were utterly appalling. Story 21. The company that is making the super-secure encrypted phone for international criminals is actually a front and is a backdoor to the United States government. Listen to the podcast called Search Engine by former Reply All host PJ Vogt to hear the story. What's the best phone to do crimes on? Is the name of the episode. Story 22. The Canadian government actually tried to fry people's brains with electroconvulsive therapy in order to fix their depression, thinking that the wiping of neurons that have a negative emotional event would fix their depression. Instead, people ended up losing their memory, suffered inconsistently, and forgot their name, all while still having depression. This was in part funded by the Central Intelligence Agency in an effort to understand memory alteration. Story 23. Eavesdropping on conversations. The existence of mass surveillance programs like PRISM was confirmed by Edward Snowden's leaks. Initially, it seemed like paranoia, but it turned out to be a reality. Story 24. Your iPhone is designed to start getting worse as soon as the new models come out. I remember this being a big deal like 7 or 8 years ago. Someone can fact-check me as I'm hazy on the details, but I believe it is related to the battery. Every year, the same week that the new iPhone comes out, the latest iOS becomes available for download. The new iOS is not optimized for your current device's battery, and as such, the phone compromises performance to maintain a similar battery life. Coupled with the normal wear and tear on the battery, your phone will start performing poorly so the battery can last a little longer. Story 25. Operation Northwoods, I believe it was called back in the day, was wild. The United States government tried to plan a false flag attack on United States soil as justification to officially declare war on Cuba. They tried to make people look crazy or make us think the government would never do that to us. Then it turned out they actually wanted to do it, and it became public knowledge. Story 26. The Stolen Generation in Australia. Up until the 1950s, the Australian government euthanized, sterilized, and removed children from their parents in order to try to civilize the native Aboriginal people by educating the black out of them. Story 27. 10 times more people died from supply chain and inflation jolts in countries that suffer extreme starvation, not merely hunger, because of the economic consequences of COVID-19 than from COVID-19 itself, even if you use the highest estimated COVID-19 deaths. Story 28. There are entire departments of governments internationally that are dedicated to spamming comment sections, news groups, and social media with propaganda. Story 29. Around a month ago, Russian state media were caught spending millions on American YouTubers to ensure they expressed concerns about immigration and related issues. Tim Pool and Dave Rubin. Story 30. The United States spirited Nazi scientists out of Germany to avoid war crimes trials to work for us instead. The Public Health Service withheld treatment for syphilis from black men to see what would happen. The Central Intelligence Agency tested the effects of LSD on unwitting American subjects. Also, The collection of human radiation experiments where certain entities conducted experiments without informed consent. These projects included the Cincinnati experiments and the Green Run. I say with complete honesty, these are still considered the good guys. Please don't stop to think about what the bad guys have done, or you'll never recover, and the good guys will experiment on you without consent. Again, Story 31. The crowd saying, "No one wants to work anymore," is intentionally putting out advertisements for jobs they never intend to fill. They are called ghost jobs, and it is all meant to keep current employees from quitting.